All right, thank you for joining us today. And I call the February 9th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. So let's begin with introduction of commission members.
Scott Paul.
Lucretia King.
Joanna Johnson.
Dave Hoganson.
Tanya Graywind.
All right, next item is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, motion carried. Next item is to approve the minutes of the January 12th, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Anything? All right, those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, okay, motion carried. The next item is to approve the minutes of the January 25th, 2023 Town Hall meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
All right. Anything? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried. The next item is public comment. Those who wish to speak to the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers must state their name and will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments should not contain any profanity or personal attacks. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, today we have 4. First is Faith Dixon, please.
Thank you for having me. I am battling a little bit of a cold, so apologize if I cough a little bit here and there. I wasn't even gonna say anything this evening. Having a great day, came out from work, and I'm dealing with a lot of anger, so I'm trying not to let it come across today because I'm gonna try to be open as possible. But I had to look up what the term abuse of power is. And after looking that up and reading the definition, it kind of made me feel a little bit better because I know that I'm not making these things up in my head. But reading the definition is encompass all the ways police officers can abuse their position by taking advantage of the people they are pledged to serve and protect. Harassment. Also, it's not always harmless, but unjust police tactics can cause a person mental and physical harm. I was reading up the ADA, American Disability Act today, and I didn't understand why Fargo Police Department chooses to harass people with disabilities. But after coming out for work today, parking in the handicap because I do suffer with an illness that caused me to have lung issues. And to see a ticket placed on my vehicle is making me really, truly upset. To have a husband that sits in this audience today who is permanently disabled as well, and to know that his wife is being harassed every time she parks in a handicap spot is very discouraging. I'm gonna ask this board to please do their job, and let's figure out how, as an activist or if somebody that comes up to speak, that they don't have to be retaliated against for just speaking the truth or speaking my truth. You might not agree with me on everything that I'm saying. You might not have ever agreed on anything that I'm saying, but I have my right to speak. It's my First Amendment right. And nobody that wears a badge and carries a gun should be able to retaliate against me to cause personal harm, even mental, to me or my family, because we speak of the truth. So I'm gonna ask this board to please look into more of why Fargo Police Department continues to harass me and my family. We are disabled, and I just wanted to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Kelly Nowak. Did I say that right? I'm sorry.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Kelly Nowak. I live in Fargo. I've been living in Fargo since 2010. I'm going to put my purse down real quick. I'm here tonight because an individual I know was, and I'm using the word harassed by 4 officers last week walking home from the grocery store during the morning, approximately 9 a.m. He was afraid to come speak this evening, and I said, well, you know what, it's a general concern of mine that I've had for quite some time. So I'll just give you a quick summary. He was walking home from the grocery store and noticed that an officer was following him in his car. He turned down a block that wasn't his block, and the officer continued to follow. He then approached the officer and asked the officer why he was being followed. I don't remember what the response was, but this individual had said to the officer, I want your card. I'm not feeling safe. I'm going back to the grocery store. The individual walked back to the grocery store, went inside. The officer had called 3 more officers. 4 officers come into the grocery store, approach this individual who had just been in the grocery store shopping and was on their way home. And they began to ask him all kinds of questions. This individual said, I have not done anything wrong. I don't need to answer any of your questions. I want all of your cards. And he had said that this is becoming harassment. This has happened to this individual several times over the course of the last 10 years. Each time it has happened, I become less and less trusting of the Fargo Police Department. If an individual cannot walk home during the day without considered being a suspect, there is really something wrong with the culture of our police department in Fargo-Moorhead. This individual has also been followed in the evening hours coming home from the grocery store. This individual does not have a car and walks or is on bicycle. One of the last times that this happened, he was coming home late at night on his bicycle and was pulled over by an officer for no reason other than he was out late at night coming home from the grocery store. And the officer had said to him, I'm wondering why you're in this neighborhood. This is a bad neighborhood. And the individual said, I'm coming home from the grocery store, sorry. Can I just finish real quick? Just wrap it up. So I guess my overall concern is, I think Faith had mentioned the abuse of power. I think we see it over and over and over again in our community. And I think we need to be more diligent in our approach to addressing that issue because it's happening and it's happening to people that don't deserve to be harassed. So, not that anybody deserves to be harassed, but
Yeah, thank you.
I think we need to take action.
Next is Karen Van Vossen. Karen? Okay. And then last is Mr. Conrad Olson. No comments? Okay. We are done with public comment. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is department updates.
Good evening, Board. A couple things for you this evening. I've had two Zoom meetings with the Collaborative Reform Technical Assistance Center in the COPS office. They have all of the information, and they are working on a proposed work plan, both from policy review and community outreach. Those are the pieces that we discussed. So I haven't heard from them since our last meeting last week, but they are taking on our request to do that review, and I will keep you apprised of that progress and let you know what the work plans and things that come out of that.
Excuse me.
Any questions specific to that before I go to the next item?
Do you have any?
Is the review in regards to a specific incident or just all critical incidents in general?
Well, I think both. They're looking at policy review in general related to use of force, specifically the O'Brien shooting in specifics in terms of community outreach and those types of things as well.
Okay. And so the timeline, we don't know yet, but
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't give me a timeline, but they've been pretty responsive. So we've had 2 Zoom meetings already in terms of exchanging information. I provided them all the materials and website links and things like that. So I think it would take them some time to kind of consume that and then have discussions and then come back to us.
thank you very much.
Sure. The next item, just clarification for, I guess, everyone that's watching and our board. At the Monday commission meeting, Mr. Filame made a presentation and stated that our department did not have de-escalation training, or that our whole department did not have de-escalation training. Our whole department has had de-escalation training, a national program that the Police Executive Research Forum puts out. It's called Integrated Communications Assessments and Tactics. It's a pretty renowned national program. And we also have trainers. So all of our new officers are integrated into that de-escalation training as part of their initial academy. And I was able to speak with Wes after the meeting and let him know about that. And just so you're aware, he requested that maybe a presentation on that be given at one of these future meetings, so that could be an agenda discussion as well. And I checked with Sergeant Jacobson, and during your use of force training, you didn't necessarily get exposed to this program, but we can certainly provide you the information and do a presentation if you'd like to agendize that in the future. And then just to address a couple of the concerns brought forward tonight, Ms. Dixon, we have her complaint and we'll investigate that. We'd be happy to report back to the board the results of that once that is done. That does involve the issuance of a citation, so it will likely require that the court case be concluded before the internal investigation is concluded. So it may take, depending upon how quickly that runs through the city prosecutor's office, but we will certainly review that and report back to you on that. But the authority to enforce handicap violations is state law, and it is an authority that law enforcement agencies have, and that's done routinely. And I'd be happy to pull any data related to that for the board if there's questions down the road as well. In regards to Ms. Nowak's information, if she would like to hang around at the end or provide her contact info, we'll reach out to her and see who the individual is, because of course we would need to actually speak with the individual to get the specifics of the incident in order to do an investigation. And then lastly, this Saturday at 10 a.m., we have our memorial ceremony at the police department in honor of Jason Mosier, who was killed in the line of duty February 11th, 2016. So it's a 7-year memorial for him. That'll be a brief ceremony starting at 10 a.m. and just wanted to let the board know about it in the event any of them, or any of you rather, wanted to stop in and see that. And then absent any questions, that's all I have for updates tonight.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the board discussion pertaining to developing bylaws. This is a continuation from our last meeting. And I guess we just kind of continue to to go through this, right? One of the things, so there were some things on the agenda, communication between board members and the public, board members and staff and other city boards. So would we like to start that conversation? Communication between the board members. So this is, just to clarify, obviously, having a certain number of board members is a quorum, right? And then if two board members were meeting and talking about the advisory board, that would still be something that would be to open records. Is that correct, Nancy? Or,
So yeah, open records and open meetings are confusing topics, to be sure.
yeah,
But you're right, starting with the premise that whenever there is a communication between a quorum of the members, that you have a meeting, and to not notice that meeting and have it in a public setting would be a violation of the open meeting law. That is in person, by email, by Zoom, virtual. It's communications between members of a governing body is a meeting. So you would want to make sure that any communications you have are with fewer than a quorum, and then you don't, what we call daisy chain, or have any further discussions. If two people meet and then discuss with another person, you're 3 out of 7, you're still okay. If there's another person brought into that conversation, that's 4, you're at a quorum,
Okay.
and you need to have a meeting.
right,
You need to notice that meeting.
right.
So I can just kind of give you just a summary of my thoughts on the questions here, and then for further discussion on your points, how you want to handle some of these things. The communication between the board meetings, my initial reaction is no, don't do it. But of course, that is, the caveat is yes, but not with a quorum. So again, it's between the board members. So we always say, don't communicate with each other. You don't reply all so that you're seeing everybody else's communication. Staff will provide you that information. That information that's provided is a record, but you're not weighing in on it, and you're not going to be having a meeting, building a consensus, or do anything that's related to the public business. Communication between board members and the public, that's the same consideration. A member of the public can reach out to 1 or 4 or 3 of you, but to reach out to 4, again, you've had that then communication with the public by a quorum of your members, and other people are not able to be participating in that meeting. So again, it's a numbers situation. But again, it's really because transparency of what you're doing is important here. So again, not a quorum. We should talk about what that process might be. And of course, that process is that comment form can be sent to the comment site for the Fargo Police Department. And then that is provided for whether it should be agendized or how it should be addressed by this board as a whole. Communications with staff, again, not more than a quorum of board members. You can each communicate with staff individually, but not as a group. Communication between board members and other city boards, you would do that as a board. So if you took an action at your board meeting that you wanted to convey some information to another board, that I will say there really isn't an established protocol for that your guidance here is to assist the city and city commission, the elected officials, in making those decisions, but certainly it's something that needs to be further considered by the boards and how they want to handle that between boards, but really isn't a protocol for that, because you're all tasked with a different mission to assist the city commission in their decision-making. So again, the recommendation is actions taken here as a recommendation to the city commission. not to another board for further action. So again, as an individual, you can reach out to a board member. You can't reach out to a quorum of another board member either. But as a board, if you're going to take any action, it's a recommendation to the city commission.
Right.
But I just wanted to kind of, that's where my responses are to those, and then, it's up to you to discuss how you want to handle those communications. Keeping in mind that anything you do email that is related to city business on your personal email is an open record as well.
Okay. And then, maybe too, to kind of clarify, and I guess I don't really know how to do this down like the bylaw piece of it, but so if we, like, for instance, as an individual, we, find a comment that is, something that, hey, I'd like to know more about that, and we have a conversation just to recognize that the individual board member is meeting of their own volition, but not meeting as a representative of the board itself, right? I mean, right, as long as it's not a quorum, but like we could meet with the community if we felt the desire, right, yeah.
Right, that wouldn't be a meeting, that would need to be
Right.
noticed, an open meeting. But keeping in mind that if that communication is happening because you're a member of this board, that is a record.
Right.
Some of the clarification that we're asking, if you wouldn't mind, Chair, is there's nothing wrong with someone bringing something up and you wanting to seek more clarification. But of course, we're just asking you don't make any promises, and then you're just information gathering with the intention of bringing that back to the board so that all decision-making is made collectively by the board, that you are not making any promises independently or individually, that it's just really like information gathering in that listening session type forum with additional questions and concerns and getting more detail so that ultimately when you bring the information back to the board collectively, you have as much data as possible.
Yes.
It also, you're also welcome to state, there's more information needed and request assistance from staff as well. So, hey, you can ask me to reach out to somebody who is looking for more specific information that even you might not be able to know how to question further or get additional detail or anything like that. And so the staff is willing to assist in those capacities as well, and then we bring all that information back to the board.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So I think that, I don't know if there's any bylaw. Sorry. I don't know if there's any bylaw requirements that we need to amend or change. I think the biggest piece is that we want to make sure that we're able to communicate both internally and externally without creating a quorum. And if we do create a quorum, that it's intentional, right? That it's part of a meeting of the board. So like we did in December, outside of this official capacity with our monthly meeting, if we choose that we're deliberately going to meet again to discuss the listening session, to discuss a specific event that occurred, that we're deliberate about it, that we do it ahead of time, that we plan for it, that it's announced if we're going to cross that threshold for the quorum. So I think that is more clear now than, we've been learning as we go. And so I think we understand those boundaries a little bit better based on the transparency laws. I still think that we're limiting our ability to communicate. And I think, like we did in December, we should have a couple more of those opportunities. I feel like we're not making progress. We meet monthly and then nothing happens. And so I think that if we are going to serve our role as an oversight and advisory board, we have to start making recommendations, whether they be policy or what have you. And I think in order for us to serve in that role, we have to find more opportunities where we can communicate. either as a quorum or not as a quorum.
Right, and I think there's still a lot that we're learning, and having presented to us. There's certain things we still don't know, like certain, presentations from, the chief or, the force itself, certain things that maybe we need more clarification on or education on so that we can better understand in order to provide those recommendations, right? Yeah. Okay. Anything?
Madam Chair, can I make a request?
Yes.
I am asking board members if you are communicating with the staff because there's something that's occurring on your mind and you would like it to be discussed for a potential future agenda item, that if it's based off of any research that you are doing, that you would also include that research to the staff so that we can also have an understanding of the context and the information of which you are gathering, the information and the mindset, so that we can also look into some of the specifics, because so often laws and open records things are very different from state to state. And so sometimes that would help us process and give context on why we can go in that direction or we cannot, or have an understanding of where some of the conversation or the data that you may be referring to is coming from. Please.
Yeah, right. That's how we have a productive conversation, is if everyone has the opportunity to have that. So if you bring something up that you want to talk about that maybe you're reading about or something,
Right.
being able to provide the information to all the board members so that we have and clearly the sergeant and the chief, so we all can come prepared for the discussion.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. You have any thoughts on that?
Does that need to be specifically stated in a bylaw or anything like that?
No.
I don't think that's, yeah.
No, I don't know that it does, and I'll just chime in. I am tasked with writing down the bylaws that you provided for last time and voted on. Some of them have been implemented, of course, without being written down, but they were voted on. I will have a draft of that for your consideration at the next meeting. I will have a general summary of the open meeting, open records, and perhaps guidance as to how that would, communication with staff is best accomplished.
Let me ask a question. In terms of the communication amongst different boards, and so you said that there wasn't really a precedent for the communication, but that we would refer to providing communication or advising for something to be sent to city commission. Is that something that will be included in that, in the law or the bylaws that the description, the explanation of how we communicate? I just, it comes back to when the Human Rights Commission, I think it was, had referred something to us, and the confusion that it caused, that we weren't sure what we were supposed to do with that. And so I'm just wondering if that will be included in there, and then if that's something that will be potentially sent to other groups as well, other committees.
I don't know exactly what that guidance will be, like I said, because there really isn't a protocol for it. But I don't want to say you can't do it either. It's just, we don't know what that looks like.
Okay.
So I think it probably is just following the open meeting laws
Okay.
for those communications. And if the communication is from a board, if you choose to do that, it should be a board decision, not just, one member directing it to another board.
And just to chime in on a little bit, I would actually support the concept of having something in a bylaw that gives some direction to all of the boards in that. That's more of a discussion that I could have with the mayor, the administration, and just have that discussion, because I think there is confusion amongst the boards in terms of how that can be done effectively. So I think that would be a good area to explore and maybe come up with some suggested language would probably involve maybe conversations with the chairs and city admin, but I'll bring that forward and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you.
I've got a question. If a board member would like to make a comment, for instance, if I wanted to make a public comment at a human rights board meeting, and that public comment would come from, not as a board member, but myself as a citizen, is there any guidance there or anything that would make that inappropriate or anything to be aware of?
I don't know for sure, and then beyond candidate, it's you would be speaking as an individual, not as a member of the board. So that would be the only guidance at that point, is to make that clear that you don't speak on behalf of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Right. Is there any? So do we need to be making any motions when we're clarifying this today? I mean, is it some of the stuff we're going over?
I don't think there is an action item. I will try to provide that summary guidance in bylaws for you that you'll be able to review at the next meeting.
Yep, okay.
I'd also like to ask, if you're unsure if this is going to be an open records, or you're welcome to send it to the staff. We can get that information back to you, and then if it is okayed and we don't believe it's going to be a violation of any open records, open meetings, I will then continue to send it on to the rest of the board, so that in the beginning, as we're still all learning about all of this, to include staff, that we check in with each other and with the experts too, so don't hesitate to do that before you send it to the whole group.
So for instance, if we had something that we were looking up and we wanted to share with the board, would it be better to send that, say, to you and then have you send it to all? Or what's the best way to go about that?
So there's a difference between just sending data to the board that does not require the board to respond back to.
Okay.
That is very different than starting a conversation that would potentially result in action and or opinion and or motions and things like that. Like, hey, I think this should be put it back. Think this should be on an agenda. And then somebody comments back to the whole group, yeah, I agree, this should be on the agenda. And so then that's what gets us into trouble. If you're just going, hey, here's what's happening nationally, and that I wanted to send you this link. It's my understanding that that is very different than asking the community, the board members, to spark an opinion or a dialogue, or which would then result in future information. All that we're asking is that when you send the information of which you are learning, that it's not your summary of the data or the information, that you are sending the exact data so that we know context and state and who the author, those types of things, so that if there is something that is not applicable here in our state and those kinds of things law-wise, that we have the ability to educate back to the board. We appreciate you bringing this information. However, laws in this state are different than because why, and those kinds of education and resources, or we can have those kinds of things. Do you understand the difference in the conversation? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
So I'm just going to add in, it's not, it should be going to Sergeant Jacobson, not to all of the other board members, and then Sergeant Jacobson, or not to a quorum of the board members. Sergeant Jacobson then will be the provider of that information in appropriate context.
Right, okay. So sending it to Sergeant Jacobson.
Madam Chair, just Before you move to the next item, if I may. My apologies, I forgot in the opening updates to introduce you to our new member of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department, Ahmed Schill, and sorry about that. But maybe give him an opportunity to introduce himself to the board as well.
Thank you for the, excuse me. Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to meet you guys all. This is my third week, so I'm still learning the ropes. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me and we can connect and learn from each other.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, are we ready to move on to the next piece here? On the agenda, number 8 on the agenda, the board discussion pertaining to officer use of profanity. Anything?
Yeah, I guess I'll start since that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And before we discuss it, I guess I wanted to give the reasons why I thought it was important. And this actually may come up in some of the insights that are returned from the collaborative reform. But when it comes to profanity, it's not allowed within these chambers. And those rules within the chambers aren't applied conditionally, meaning that we don't tell the public use of profanity is not allowed unless they're angry or frustrated or scared. It's just not allowed. And so moving into law enforcement, use of profanity by law enforcement has been linked to the public being afraid of police officers. And I'm not saying it's prevalent within Fargo, I'm just giving a macro viewpoint. Law enforcement use of profanity is also a barrier to establishing trust between police and the public. And of course, trust was one of the things that was pleaded for at our recent listening session. So I think it's appropriate to talk about that tonight. Law enforcement use of profanity rarely results in improved citizen compliance. And in fact, it's been linked to triggering a fight or flight response. Law enforcement use of profanity runs counter to de-escalation efforts and is linked to increased stress levels in both the officer using the offensive language and to the person to whom those offensive words are directed. Law enforcement use of profanity runs counter to efforts being made to end tense situations peacefully. And again, I'm not saying that use of profanity is prevalent amongst the Fargo PD. I don't know. I'm hopeful that it's not. But nonetheless, I think only good things can happen by talking about it and maybe even considering having a formal written policy prohibiting it, or maybe even strongly just discouraging it. And so circling back to the Fargo PD, officer use of profanity is one of the actions that was taken by a Fargo police officer just seconds before that fatal gunshot. And while not using profanity may not have changed the outcome, I think we can all agree that it certainly doesn't help. And so I'd just like to talk about it a little bit. And, I guess this is kind of low-hanging fruit, or call it a no-brainer. We treat each other with respect, and law enforcement is seen as more professional. It's a trust-building thing, and I think maybe formalizing it would be a pretty good first step in offering an olive branch, if you will, to make some efforts to improve trust with the differing communities within our city. And so with that, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on what do you think? Or you guys?
Sure. Well, just to clarify, we do have a policy that deals with profanity and other derogatory treatment of anyone.
Okay,
And we have examples that we could show to the board from internal investigations in which we have appropriately issued discipline for that type of inappropriate treatment. But it is judged like every other instance in the totality of the circumstances. So it's not like every time someone uses profanity, they would be found to violate policy and get punitive discipline, right? But we do have that. Deputy Chief Anderson could go into that in detail in fact, he's got his end-of-year personnel complaint report ready to go also for presentation to the board. And if that is something you would like to agendize, we could specify that he pull out some of those cases and we can synopsize some of those cases so you can see how we've addressed that.
I think so.
Yeah.
So is it, and maybe not, is it, not a clear-cut policy that officers don't, but is it a best practice, or how would you
Well, it's in the,
clarify?
it's in the policy, but it's like, the easiest comparison would be traffic laws. If I stopped every car for every violation and gave them a ticket, I'd never make it one block, right? And so application of those policies comes down to the investigation and ultimately my decision in that. And so in certain circumstances, while it is not advisable, and you're right, it doesn't necessarily ever help, it's also part of a human element that happens in some of these situations, and I think we also have to consider that. That's part of one of our considerations when we look at internal investigations. And actually, we look at 4 specific things in addition to the circumstances. We look at employee motivation, right? Were they trying to do the right thing and it went wrong anyway, or were they neglecting to do what they should have done, or were they maliciously trying to do something and incite some type of a response? We look at their years of experience, because I think we would all appreciate that someone who has 6 months on the job versus 6 years or more, that experience level improves your ability to handle stressful situations, all right, in a more professional manner. We look at their intentional, unintentional decisions, right? Did they intentionally do this? Were they, emotionally in a bad position and reacted impulsively? And then lastly, we look at the prior disciplinary record. So those 4 elements, and that's all in our personnel complaint policy as well as part of the overall final discipline review and decision-making process. So that's where that kind of filters in. But there's I would point you to the policy manual and see that that's there. But yes, if you would you like, and I'll make a note on the presentation if that's something that, and we'll get that at the next agenda meeting as
I
well.
guess I would if everybody thought it was.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, yeah, I think the personnel complaint report, I think that's helpful, and I think that even comes back from our listening session, right? It would even address some of the questions that came up there from community members. So that seems,
And it's hard to know if this is a problem, right? Like you said, David, I'm not sure if this is locally, if it's a high complaint item, or if it's, a handful a year, if that maybe it's a policy, it's discouraged, but it happens, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
and whether or not we need to spend time in this board reviewing the number of complaints, if there were 3 during the year, well, then maybe it's not worth going through. If there were 35, then maybe that's a data point that we should explore more on.
Sure. I would say anecdotally that it's not very common.
Sure.
In fact, in most cases where we have complaints, we're seeing a lot of professionalism on the officer's part, but does it happen? Yes. I mean, I can think of one specific case that would be maybe of interest to review just to see how we handled it from the perspective of trying to address the conduct, change the behavior, and ultimately we weren't able to, and the individual's no longer with our department. So, I mean, we do take that appropriate action, but again, in a fair fashion from a disciplinary perspective.
I think the emphasis of professionalism, culture, and it's one piece of a much larger puzzle is what we're after anyway. This may be a small piece of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and as your vision and our vision of what good law enforcement looks like in Fargo, I don't know if this is talked about in other cities, but I just think it'd be in this day and age where use of force and de-escalation are big topics nationally, for Fargo to lead on something like this was something pretty easy. I mean, as maybe a policy that simply discourages it, or something that says as a best practice, we don't, or just, some language there I think would be, meaningful.
All right. Anything else you'd like to talk on that? Thank you, David. And the next item on the agenda is the board discussion reviewing the January listening session. So the question is, so we had the listening session and we all heard a lot, and I think we all take in different aspects, or the information enters our brain even slightly different, which I think really helps in the scope of things. But I'm wondering if, as a board, we meet and we go through some of the items that were brought to our attention during the listening session, and then we can decide if there's, what the priorities were and how to move those things to agenda items. And again, maybe some of the concerns or interest from the community, maybe the Fargo Police can also provide us with some education on how they approach that and what their policy looks like, according to some of those issues, so that we also have maybe a better understanding even at some point.
Sure.
And how does it work? And then we can figure out, what it looks like and if there needs to be any suggestions or changes.
Like another brown bag meeting.
Yeah.
I think that would be good.
What do you think?
Yeah.
As a board getting together, maybe doing a brown bag and talking about
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think, those of us that were taking notes, and I know that Sergeant Jacobson was also taking notes, so it would be good to get everything all together and provide some of our feedback and suggestions. I know that some of the community members had some really great ideas in terms of some education for themselves and for the police, so I think it's a great idea.
From a momentum standpoint, I think if we wait until a March board meeting again to talk about it or to do anything about it, that's a loss, right? I think I wish I'd been able to be there, but it seems like it was a success.
Right.
And it seems like it can be a stepping stone for future events like this, or maybe modified events like that. But we need to embrace the momentum from that. And if there are 2 or 3 policy items or training items or something that can come from that, we need to do it now rather than waiting till a month from now, in my opinion.
So you're suggesting a brown bag session sooner than later?
Sooner rather than later, yeah.
I agree. One of the biggest takeaways from the listening session was, as a white person, I have never felt threatened by law enforcement, or I've never not trusted, or if I've thought I've needed help, I've never hesitated to pick up the phone. And so it was very eye-opening for me to hear BIPOC folks saying that they don't that's not the way they see it a lot of times. And so that trust and that kind of thing, that should be probably the lion's share of such brown bag meeting that we have. I had no idea.
Right, so then, what does that look like, Sergeant Jacobson, as far as time-wise, like, what's realistic for us as a board?
So I hear that the goal is to have this conversation so that we can kind of process the next meeting, how we're going to implement the information that we have broken down from the listening session. Because I think ultimately, we'll be able to determine your hierarchy on future board agenda items and the information that you'd like us to be able to bring in subject matter experts in education and resources on. We can also then determine what your goals are as a board to provide education to the community, or guide us on partnering with you to provide an educational session to the community. And then having the community's perspective on recommendations within the police department for growth, change, and education within our department. And so I think breaking down all of the notes that were sent to you for the previous meeting minutes will be extremely helpful, and then we can hierarchy your goals for both internally within the board for your future meetings, and then how we're going to implement things within the community. And so meeting dates would probably be best to be discussed and then is decided upon before we leave here. So realistically, the next 3 Wednesdays before the board meeting, I know work for the staff, so that would be February 15th, the 22nd, and March 1st. If we need to move away from a Wednesday, we also have Monday, March 27th open as well. And so we can host that brown bag very similarly to the one we did before. It'll likely be at the same location, and the whole purpose and intention of the meeting is to just break down all of the notes that were sent to you from that meeting so that you can process and prioritize that information.
Yeah, so I guess it sounds like the next 3 Wednesdays, well, did Wednesdays work for everybody? Last time, was Wednesday a good day? Yeah. And you gonna be around?
God willing.
Is there any Wednesday you're not
For a
going
month,
to?
I'll be here at least.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so let's get it while you're,
Yeah.
while you're
I-
here.
Is next Wednesday, is that realistic for us to pull that off? Or should we go for the 22nd?
I can make Wednesday work, next Wednesday.
I think the sooner the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
15th?
Sorry, we just realized there was a conflict for us on the 15th. Can we do it the 22nd?
Yes.
For staff?
22nd works.
Sorry, so sorry.
Sorry. That's Ash Wednesday. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
The 22nd?
Okay, works.
Okay. So,
So
so our next brown bag session will be February 22nd?
I would anticipate it being exact same location as before, but I cannot 100% confirm that until I lock that in, it being open and available. What timeline to start are you looking for?
90 minutes?
Last time, I believe we started at 6. Or do you want
Right.
same? Do you want 5 o'clock? Or will you tell me?
5:30? 6 o'clock?
I'm pretty flexible in time that day,
Yep, I'm flexible as well, so.
Same.
5:30?
Sure.
5:30 to 7?
Yep, does 90 minutes sound good? Is that possible, 90 minutes? Did we do 90 minutes last time, or was, yeah,
Give or take, I think would be appropriate to start with 90 minutes, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So the 22nd at,
Sure. So I will
5:30.
send out official confirmation to all board members once I'm able to confirm the location is set for us. And then, of course, with quorum, all that information will be sent out to the community. And again, we'll just have an conversation and prioritization, and then whatever information we narrow down at that meeting will be discussed and then voted upon it at the March meeting. So it'll be no actual action taken at this meeting, but really just processing together, discussing the items that were given to you in the listening session, and then ideally kind of processing out loud your prioritization so that that will very much be helpful and appreciated by me so that we can move forward with future agenda items that are understood and prioritized by you as a board so that we can start locking in outside instructors and those types of things so that you feel like you are accomplishing more. But we're capable of providing you that foundational education so that if you are going to make choices and decisions, that they are based on all of the facts and education and information that you are seeking.
Thank you.
I have a question. From the last brown bag meeting, is there any updates from the mayor on the programs he was bringing into the city, dealing with the mental health issues and a few other things we talked about?
I don't know if the mayor had any mental health updates. I know that we, within our police department, have had a lot of great strides, and I know that was updated as well at the listening session of the things that we are doing internally within the department.
Look at my notes. I can't
Yeah.
remember what that was in particular.
We are also working on our collaborations with mental health community organizations and resources to strengthen our collaborations so that when we're dealing with individuals in mental health crisis, there's a collaborative approach instead of a solely law enforcement one. And I know that our department is working very strongly with Southeast and several other entities so that we are adequately meeting the needs of the community members. And then secondarily, we are bringing in extensive mental health resources for the officers themselves and their family members.
I think that's probably a pretty good agenda item for the future as far as an education
Sure.
item
Yeah.
that we should request
Yeah,
for an upcoming meeting.
yeah,
That one's
And-
not going to go away.
yeah. And the collaborative approach, I think, would be, we heard that at the listening session as well, right?
Yeah, complaints on
Or just
not being
wanting more.
included more.
All right, anything else? Is there any other business? Anyone would like to bring up? No? Okay. All right, well, hearing none, hearing no further business, this meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board will stand adjourned. Our next meeting is March. Oh, yeah.
February 22nd.
Well, that's our brown bag, right? But the next one is Advisory Oversight Board meeting is March, the same 9th, right? March 9th at 5. So thank you all for coming.